Today we are very proud to interview the editor-in-chief, David Jenkins, of the film magazine Little White Lies. Little White Lies is a bi-monthly magazine published in London since 2005. In 2013, it was described in The Guardian as the best designed film magazine on the shelf. And really, Little White Lies is a very beautiful magazine. But not only that, this magazine is unique on the market in its very specific visual language, its structure, but also in its diverse contextualizations of individual films. Today we want to go into a little more depth and ask David how Little White Lies came about and what this unique treatment of films and film culture entails. So glad to have you here. And first of all, I have to ask my recurring question. That is a question I ask in all my interviews of film magazines. And can you describe why we still need a printed film magazine like Little White Lies? What does a printed film magazine offer that the internet or trailer doesn't?
Well, first, thank you for having me on this and speaking to me about the world of magazines, which is a world that I'm completely immersed within. To answer your question, it's a question that I think maybe has a different answer every day, depending on the kind of fluctuations of the media landscape and what's happening and what people are, and what kind of culture in general seems to kind of desire. And I think that traditionally we've thought of having a magazine as I think because one of our interests, I think, is curation and the idea of, I think we have a kind of mindset of the internet lacks a kind of coherent form of curation that algorithms, that even when algorithms are kind of supposedly working, I don't think they necessarily do work in a way that a kind of human would think, or that there is a kind of empathy and emotion that's kind of lacking there. And yeah, it's sort of like the idea of putting things together in a very kind of physical space, creating context between films. For instance, within the magazine, we have like a review section where we include reviews of like new feature films coming out that readers can seek out and see. And it's not only about like which review films we cover in that section, it's like what films go next to other films, and what order they run in, and what images do we use, and what's going to be the experience of like turning the page. And we don't want every single page to kind of look the same, so it's kind of creating a kind of experience, rather like a full-on experience, rather than just this kind of single serving thing. But yeah, more on just a little note on the kind of practicalities of print magazines. It's worth saying that like for a long time, it was, I think a lot of people, you think of print and you think expensive, unwieldy. When you see people who have just announcing they're starting up a new print magazine, you just kind of think, why are you doing that? But there was a long period, probably up to kind of the Corona COVID pandemic, where actually like there was a financial feasibility to doing print, and it wasn't like prohibitively expensive, and the relative gains from actually doing it and having advertising in print actually made it viable. Now, I mean, I'm sort of talking to you here live from Brexit Britain, where the costs of everything seem to be rising on a daily basis, and the job of making a print magazine now is less about not less about the creativity. I mean, there is still creativity involved, but much more of my time and effort goes on to feasibility and funding, and actually making sure that we can cover the costs of the rising, steeply rising costs of actually making a print magazine.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, but I will come back to the experience, which I found very interesting, and turning the pages and the order. But perhaps let's go first back a little bit to the beginnings, and especially the title. So I read already that Little White Lies comes from lyrics of Radiohead song Motion Picture Soundtrack. I'm quoting, "Stop sending letters. Letters always get burned. It's not like the movies. They fed us on Little White Lies." But tell us something about the subtitle, Truth and Movies. I mean, the magazine podcast also has this title. So we have here lies, truth, and movies. Can you tell us a bit with why that connection? What do you see in this connection between the terms that Little White Lies combine them so prominently in their titles?
Well, I think that, first thing to say is that I came on as editor in 2013, and I think it's a kind of tagline that I inherited from the people who created the magazine.
Right.
That's not to, and we've obviously kept it on because I think it's an effective tagline. I guess I'm sort of in a way trying to guess what their motivations were a bit, but I know that when the magazine was founded, and I think this holds true today, that there was a sort of there was a sort of suggestion of like a lot of these magazines had a lot of kind of marketing and PR, and there was a lot of stuff that was kind of it was promotional and massaging films and previewing films, and you weren't actually learning the truth about them, like the reality. And there was certainly, I think maybe more so then than there is now, a real kind of quite sort of punkish attitude towards a real like sense of we're going to be like brutally honest about what we think about these films. And if you look at the older issues, so many films get bad scores, and there are even instances where like I think they were so the sort of original editor was so sort of true to this mantra that we had films that were on the cover, which I think psychologically for a reader, you'd think if a film was on a cover, a magazine would be, feel that it was a cause for celebration, or that the editors want people to discover this film. Whereas actually the inside the magazine, that there would be like a negative review of the film. And that happened quite a few times. And I think that people within the industry were quite confused by that impulse. Which is not to say that it's an incorrect impulse. It's completely, I think there is a sort of, logic to it, I think. But it was, I think maybe it didn't, if you're kind of working within the industry of, the film industry, maybe like, I think maybe that was the way that some bridges may have been burned. So, but no, I mean, but not in any meaningful way, because obviously we're still here now. But yeah, I think that it's sort of the intention that is that it represents, the fact that we are part of the alternative media. We're an independent publishing company, TCO London. That we're passionate about these things, and truth and honesty is something that people are looking for and they want to be assured of, I think. And so we kind of have nailed this slogan to our masthead. And actually, I think that probably more so using it for our podcast is probably a better way to use it, because it is more focused on voices and opinions and discussion. And I think that sometimes in print and online with written media, you maybe don't have that kind of personal opinion context. You have, unless it's kind of like screamed on the page, this is a personal opinion, this is what, a lot of news websites have it very sort of delineated as opinion and news. I think it's, from a design perspective, it's sometimes hard to do that, but like that the podcast gives us this little place where we can really kind of, carry on those ideals.
Great. Thanks. And Little White Lies has a very special structure in that you always center on one particular film. Like the first one had Wes Anderson's movie The Life Aquatic, or the Dune issue and stuff like that. But it's interesting from a research side because it makes the magazine in a way more bookish. Would you agree that at least the first part of the magazine is kind of a book about the movie, and the second part is more like the movie magazines we know, trying to cover a lot of movies, at least with your reviews?
Well, this probably comes into this will probably come up again if we're talking about the illustration in the magazine, but part of the structure of the magazine was devised again by the founders. If you look at issue 1, it's the same. We're doing the same thing now as we were doing then.
Right.
But I think when you have this kind of punkish ideal, you tend to devise ways of doing things that involve minimum interaction with like other with the industry or people who are going to put kind of boundaries in your way. And I think part of the idea of coming up with this structure is to do with the fact that like you don't necessarily need anyone's sort of sign off to do that. Mm-hmm. Like if you, in a more traditional magazine where you might have like 8 big features all covering big new releases that involve interviews and maybe people signing off on things and photo shoots and things like that, it's I think it's a totally valid and valuable way to cover the film industry. But this was always about like, well, how can we kind of fit into a space? There were all, like when the magazine started, we already had the film landscape in the UK is sort of weirdly healthy and thriving. When we started, we had Total Film and Empire, which are still going and still the 2 biggest magazines. We had Sight and Sound, obviously, which was the huge, aimed at a more kind of cinephile audience. And there was I think that the rationale was like, where if this magazine was going to be started, where are we going to fit into this space? Like,
where's the niche?
If we're kind of triangulating these things, what can we do that's going to be offering something new? So the impulse was like, was always about trying to offer something different to what already was out there and being offered in abundance, and but also as a way to kind of circumnavigate the industry gatekeepers and basically do something creative that was on our own, in our own little kind of pocket and niche. And to be honest, I still feel that like, although I think we do more stuff now where we, in those early days, we just like that. One of the things was also that we didn't really have access to people. Like it's only like about sort of 7, 8, 9 issues in where we start getting access to filmmakers and actors and relatively small ones at that. And then only by like maybe sort of issue 20 are we really getting to speak to the people who are appearing on the covers of the magazine. So and that didn't necessarily always happen for a fairly long time. So I think that the industry did see value in what we were doing and wanted to kind of bolster our offering because we had developed this audience and it was they saw it as something as something new, and that our audience was different to audiences who were buying the other magazines. So
yeah,
that's kind of how that structure was born. A bit of trying to get around the industry, and a bit about making something unique.
Making something new, yeah. But can you tell us a little bit about how you choose that particular film, which will be the center of your next issue, and also now getting to the pictures also, is it right that you always have a new artist doing the pictures for this particular film?
Yeah, so it's a fairly unscientific process, and definitely one that is kind of comes from the heart, maybe from the heart as much as the head. A lot of it comes down to very boring logistics, such as kind of timing and release, and when our magazine's coming out, and when people are going to be able to see the film, and how we can kind of fit into a kind of, I think, we want the film to have some connectivity with a wider conversation. Sorry, we want the magazine to have a connectivity with a wider conversation that may be occurring. So,
but are you there focusing on the British film releases, or because you are more or less internationally read?
We do focus on UK releases because the majority of our readership is UK, even though we do have international distribution. But it's more, big. I mean, we've often talked about whether we should have more focus on American publishing. It's actually a bit of a boring thing about we deal with publicists and distributors in the UK who are working off the UK release schedule. And so if ever we have a conversation with a US publicist, they'll always, we have been pigeonholed by the industry as a UK publication. So they'll always push us back to the UK people. And it always means that our stuff is kind of teed up to run in tandem with UK releases, which, that it's fine. It's not something we're that bothered about. But yeah, I think I think that one of the things that I love about the magazine, and that I love about the job, is that I can kind of, that there is a real diversity to it. And I don't feel that, I feel that there are certain magazines that have quite, they know their audience very well, and it's a very, very, they have very, very close following, and in a way that they're very focused on serving that following. And it means that what they put on the cover tends to have to fit in a fairly narrow bracket.
Yeah.
And I think that what we try to do is a bit of a response to that, of well, actually we're trying to celebrate the fact that there is, the film is this kind of hugely diverse medium in terms of what is actually being made and who's making it, and subject matters being covered, and excuse me, how can we actually reflect that? And I love the fact that we might do, Licorice Pizza, or Decision to Leave, or The Northman. So we're doing a historical action film, and then a kind of Korean police film, and then a American comedy. We're kind of stylistically covering a lot of different terrain, and we're trying to and what that does actually is it feeds into the aesthetic of the magazine.
Yeah, right.
We want to be able to we know we have, if we're doing a magazine and we're talking about the same things that we were talking about for the previous issue, the same aesthetic inspirations, or the same type choices, or the same layouts and feature ideas, then we know that this is maybe not the best idea. It's for our own sanity in many ways that we want to change up with every single issue.
No, no, that's something I really like about your magazine, that you're mixing. You don't have um, you don't shy away from popular films, or you can say that Top Gun Maverick is still a good film,
Yeah.
and also do Poor Things in the next issue. And I read that you were raised with bad films from the movie rental place. You say that is an influence, that mixture of genres and mixture of high and low culture and popular culture. And
Yeah, absolutely. I think these being independent means that the magazine can be more of a kind of literal reflection of the people who are making it. And I think that like, I know that's maybe not the best way to be making a magazine in 2024, but like I can't help but make it personal. And sometimes, like, and so, sometimes that misfires. Like, I think there's sometimes, one of the things that, again, just comes naturally out of us, and is like, us, we kind of have our own, like, unique, not unique, but we have a sense of humor. And we see the kind of playfulness of the magazine as being a space where we can actually, like, use that. And that, that sometimes that's backfired. Like, sometimes people, our audience have not, connected to things that we thought were, like, funny. And it's never kind of crude or spiteful humor, but like, it's sometimes doing that kind of more personal thing and putting your own kind of personality in it can backfire.
can you give an example of some?
Well, in our 100th issue, we did this feature on where we kind of condensed the last 20 years of film, or the years that we have been active, into a kind of this kind of compendium of, like, lists. And they were all meant to be, it was meant to be a kind of funny, light, fun read. And I don't want to name the specific one, but there were a couple in there that we were definitely kind of having fun with, and sort of, like, being a little bit spiteful.
Okay.
And we I'm not saying that people were ending their subscriptions or anything, but we got a few emails from people saying that wasn't nice, and we were like, yeah, okay, you're probably right on that one.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah, but getting a bit back to the pictures, what is the process like between the artists, the pictures, and the film stills? Do you send the artist certain pictures which fit well to the articles you already wrote, or so what is first, the pictures or the text, and how do you decide?
The way that we do this, so I work very closely with the art director Lorraine Boglio, who's based in Massachusetts. So the way we work is we do, when she wakes up at about, well, I'll usually call her when it's 9 a.m. at her time and about 3 p.m. my time, and we'll chat for like an hour. And we're very structured about our conversations, and we kind of, we've been doing it for so many issues now that we know very clearly what needs to be done and what decisions need to be made. But yeah, because illustration is quite it's quite a labor intensive way of working.
Yeah,
and what one of the things that has been difficult about the magazine, but absolutely worthwhile and central to what we are and what we do, is keeping illustration in the magazine. And the way we tend to do it, the process is like, the first thing we'll do is we'll come up with the cover film. And then I will kind of, if sometimes we haven't seen the cover film, or maybe I'll have seen it and Lorraine may have not seen it. So I will sort of send her as much material as possible about it. And then what we'll do over maybe a couple of days a week is start sending we have a WhatsApp, we're on WhatsApp together, and we'll WhatsApp each other illustrators and images that we find online. Okay. And sometimes we'll link in like Instagram accounts for illustrators. So for everyone, we're always sort of starting from zero. Occasionally there'll be someone in mind that we're like, oh, we should use that person. But like the first thing is always let's see what's out there and try and find something completely new. Like we very rarely have an illustrator that we are thinking of and we want to kind of bring in. Like that's not to say we don't, but that's rarely the first thing we're thinking of. And we'll kind of, we'll then have a meeting where we'll just pare those down to a couple of really key influences. And then Lorraine will create a kind of color swatch for the issue. Like she'll maybe do like 3 or 4 and we'll kind of like, again, hone that down. Then we'll come up with some like typeface choices and she might even do like a mock layout or something. And we're basically, we're sort of like, the first thing we do is sort of setting all these kind of aesthetic graphic parameters for the issue and what it's going to look like. And, sometimes it can be like, oh, this issue is going to be completely handmade, or this issue is going to be, we're going to do like photocopying and, it's going to be like very punky, like when we did the Pink Flamingos issue. So when we're at that point, we'll then do another search for illustrators, and we'll have a folder. We'll just have a shared folder where we'll create maybe like 20 options of people we've discovered, and that's when we'll probably bring in people that we know as well, like people who we may have worked with before who would work for this issue. So. And then, so we'll have this folder of 20 illustrators. And then by that point, I will have maybe commissioned the features. So when I'm commissioning the features, I've got quite a good idea of like in my head of like, well, often the features are commissioned with like illustration or what it might look like in mind. Because like, for instance, like, if I wouldn't ever do like 3 list features or 4 big text features in a row, like just written through, like be like, this is a Q&A and this is going to be a list and this is going to be text. But I'll have a kind of vague idea of like what I want, what it's going to be about and what images need to be on it. That's something that that's something that me and Lorraine will like refine together. And then what we do is we kind of go through this process of we put all the features on the flat plan, and then we go through the flat plan and just like drop in like images from the illustrators of like, okay, what about if would she work for this or would he work for this?
Yeah.
And usually it's not a very long process. Like we usually kind of get it nailed down quite quickly, because like we've already done quite a lot of refining already. And like there's a lot, the arguments we usually have are like, can this person do good likenesses of people? Because often we need like illustrations of people. Or can this person do something that's more kind of abstract and patterny? And does this person have any experience of like editorial illustration? And that doesn't always matter. Or is this person going to come back and not be in our price range? Like, do they have like 2 million Instagram followers? So it's probably not going to be feasible for us to work with them. So like there's all these kind of like micro considerations, and then then it's just a case of reaching out to the illustrators, and we send them quite detailed briefs. They're usually kind of 2 or 3 pages of where we give, like, by this point, I'll have you know, lots of context about, I'll give lots of context about the film and lots of context about what the magazine is, and we'll send like examples of the magazine so people can, you know, see what they're actually going to be, you know, contributing to, you know, get them into that headspace.
Right.
And yeah, like people just, I'm just, one of the most amazing aspects of the job is getting those emails through, or getting these WhatsApps from Lorraine where someone's delivered like drafts of an illustration, and you're like, oh my god, that's incredible. And or you know, like sometimes it's like you'll see an incredible illustration or like a draft illustration, but there's one key thing that's very like, no, that's not working, or which you'll need to kind of give some you know, strategic feedback on. But but yeah, that's sort of how we do it.
And the illustrators have seen the movie, or have they only seen the film stills?
No. We like, we'll send them the trailer, but most of the time, if it's not illustration that's related to the actual film, we will give the we will just give information. I mean, to be honest, one of our kind of goals with illustration is we want to, you know, we want to like, so one of the things we look at as well when we're doing a magazine is the existing marketing, like what's already out there, what creative is already being done, and we want to sort of distance ourselves from that a bit. So in many ways, we're trying to kind of, we don't send them things like posters or stuff like that, because we don't want them to be influenced by that. And you know, we'll send them the trailer to give them a taster, but we're kind of saying, we always say, we do not want this, we do not want that. Like sometimes people do send us like, rather than what we've asked for, what they think we want. And they kind of they maybe illustrate something that they think is sort of like, oh, it's for your magazine, I'll try and do something. And one of the responses that we always have to give is like, no, we've commissioned you because we like your style, and we want you to be working in the way that you work, and we want to kind of represent that and give that to our readers. So yeah, that's another thing about the magazine, is like, you know, it's, and it applies to the text as well. Like, it's all about the individual voices, and you know, it is like, I think that goes back to the truth in movies thing. It's like, this is like, we're giving like a truthful, honest depiction of an artist's work, rather than having them work to a very strict template and a very strict set of guidelines. You know, our guidelines are really broad, and we just want people to, you know, we want these kind of artworks to you know, we want the illustrators to be proud of them, and for it to represent who they are and what they do, rather than what we do. So
right. But is color perhaps a connection to the movies? I mean, in the last issue, you have Poor Things, which is a very, you know, colorful and extreme movie in that term. And did you have some proposition that you have a certain color palette where you stick to, because there's a connection to the color of the movies, or the colors of this movie?
The reason why we actually have a color palette at all is, I guess, goes back to what I was saying about the illustrators and giving us something individual. Because the one thing that we do to give the magazine as a whole a bit of some coherence and a bit of a through line is ask people to stick to this color palette. Because even if you have illustrations that are very different, the color palette unites them. The fact that everyone's using these same set of colors means that, like, while the style is very different, there is that you can see that there are people working from the same kind of palette,
right,
which is how we create, like, which is how the magazine has a kind of coherence across it. but yeah, I mean, the colors tend to come, like, you know, sometimes the colors will come from, like, you know, we will like freeze frame it, you know, create a freeze frame on the trailer and pick out like 5 colors from that freeze frame, or you know, there are kind of there are sort of standard swatches you can get that we, you know, that sort of cover, like that represent certain tones that we want to kind of get across. Like, this is a kind of very happy, fun film, or this is melancholic, or this is kind of dour. Like, you know, you've got behind you First Cow, which has a kind of quite rustic autumnal vibe to it, and then you have The Northman, which is very like, you know, it has gold, and it also has like kind of fiery, you know, kind of, it's sort of like quite hellish colors,
right?
And then, you know, and then Decision to Leave is you know, you know, it had to be green because, like, it's a very green, you know, the film itself has got the, you know, the use of green in the film is very prominent, so we kind of were like, you know, okay, we're gonna use that. So that's kind of where the colors come from.
We are also interested in print techniques. So could you tell us perhaps a little bit about your print technique, or do you have always the same printing house where you know you get the things you want and that the colors come out the way you want them to be?
The printing has always been very linked to budget. And we tend to have to use printers who, make, you know, on one hand, we are making, you know, a very kind, you know, what we want, you know, a high-end, beautiful product, but we have to, you know, we have to try and make it on the budget that we have. And so the publisher here spends a lot of his time talking to printers about what they can give us, what deals we can have, etc., making sure that all our print that we do has this kind of premium feel to it. You know, and sometimes when you're working with printers, you know, on that level, you know, things maybe don't work out, and there have been some issue. You know, we have had issues that we kind of pick up on with colors not right, and I don't know, like, you know, little kind of mistakes happening. And you know, I think on the Decision to Leave cover, for instance, there was a version of it that came out where the logo had a kind of weird ink smudge on it, and we had to kind of, you know, reprint and replace quite a lot of the issues, which was like not cool. But yeah, it's, you know, we at the company we have other magazines that we make, and so our kind of art directors are in constant conversations with them. You know, one of the biggest projects we did was our 100th issue that had not only 4 covers, but the magazines came in a kind of slipcase as well. And you know, designing that, you know, we work very closely with the printers on, you know, getting the right specifications, and you know, making sure all the colors are correct. And you know, I mean, it's one of the things that's kind of tough in the world of printing as well is, like, you know, and it's completely understandable that if you want your product to be like super premium, there are all these checks and balances that you can do, but they do cost, you know. So like, if you wanted a proof copy, or if you wanted physical wet proofs of the magazine that you wanted to go through before it's printed, you could do that, but that feeds into the time it takes, and it feeds into the budget. And you know, we don't really have we're not able to do that. So that there is a bit of a kind of, you know, we try and put as much in as we can when we're sending it, and try and do as many of those checks as possible, but we can't do all of them.
Right. But you're using offset printing, or is that digital print?
I'm not sure actually. I think I'm not as connected to the print. Like the art director tends to have those conversations.
All
So
right.
I will find. I can find out. But
that would be interesting. Yeah, great. That would be great. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about time, because in magazine studies we always say that magazines are serial medium. And you have many issues, and they always connect to the last one, but also foreshadow the next one. And I find it interesting that you also have this in your grading system, this anticipation and enjoyment and in retrospect. So in doing a review about the film, you always talk also that talking about movies is in a way a serial experience. And I was wondering what you are saying about that, and if you're really writing it down in also in advance, or are you actually writing it down when you've seen the movie? Oh, I remember I had the anticipation.
Well, no. I think because we have to do it so often, and we're covering so much, that I think remembering to sort of like articulate our anticipation for a film before we've seen it, it would be too much of a kind of head spin.
Yeah.
So that's not to say that we're not very conscious of it and thinking about it, but I don't think to actually write it down. And I think it's a very simple thing to remember, and I think it tends to be affected by the actual experience of seeing a film, that you're able to actually kind of realize and articulate what anticipation you had from it, and whether that anticipation is being met in the kind of in the now.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the system was devised, again, just going back to the sort of early days. It was the system, it was I don't think there was necessarily a kind of profound profundity behind it, but there definitely was a sense of wanting to make it create something unique, again. But mark our territory in terms of like the fact that we're offering something different to the stars, or the out of 10, or in case of Sight and Sound, with no stars or anything like that. So yeah, creating this sort of unique temporal rating system, which people love, and we still use, and I think we still find it really fun thing to do. But yeah, no, I think we tend to have to sort of think about it in that moment. There was a time, I mean, yeah, I remember having a long conversation about it in the office many years back with one of my colleagues, and was like, how far can you actually stretch this idea? And is there maybe a sort of cynicism about anticipating films, and like, is it reflect, by having this sense of anticipation, are you kind of, are you having bad faith opinions of things that you haven't really been able to judge? Because on one hand, I think that you have this mantra. I mean, for me, you should have a mantra when you review films, that everything you see, you should go in and see it with the expectation that it could be a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Like try and go in with the best faith possible, and then if it's terrible, at least you've given it your all. That obviously with some films it's harder than others. But I remember there was I think it was when Jurassic World was coming out, which was like the first of the new Jurassic Park films. We were like, why don't we, without having seen it, I think there was a little preview trailer of it out. We were like, why don't we, as a kind of experiment, write a review of the film like 8 months before it had come out, and then open it like a time capsule, and then see what we said about this film that we hadn't seen, as a kind of way of exploring what this anticipation really means and what it actually kind of like generates in our mind.
Yeah.
But in the end, I think, you know, the impulse was that it was too cynical. It was too bad faith. And it was like, you know, I think it offered too much of a harsh critique on the Hollywood machine, which too many other publications were making. So we were kind of just like, well, let's actually just try and be a little bit more circumspect about it and give the film its chance, because it is a piece of craft, and you know, we want to try and respect it as such.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, we also already talked about, you know, that Little White Lies is personal, and that you bring your own personal view on films with you. And I really like your issue on Titan, which is of course very, very personal, because Hannah Strong, one of your writers, was so intrigued by this film that she had a tattoo of this cover on her right thigh, I think. And I guess what I'm trying to ask is, would you say you're actually writing about the movie, or more the experience of a movie?
I think that that's I can, for me, I guess I'm trying to write, you know, I mean, I guess that gets into sort of questions of like subjectivity and objectivity, and where that line exists when you're kind of critiquing a film or exploring a film. Personally speaking, you know, I try and be as objective as possible, knowing that, you know, full pure objectivity is like an impossible ideal, and that everything is going to be come from with your, you know, loaded with your own prejudices and ideas. You know, like, but I think that people do write in different ways and through different lenses, and you know, there are some critics who might focus more on, like, you know, that, like, the idea of like, this is not a good film. I think this is, you know, this happens quite a lot of, like, you know, if I'm being objective, this is not a good film, but as kind of junk food trash, it's really, it's pretty tasty, you know, like, and you know, that's when that comes into it, about the experience of like, well, I did actually see this in a cinema, and you know, it's that kind of experience of being with these people and having these vicarious emotions sort of thrown at me, did actually make what was, you know, a terrible film you know, quite pleasurable. So yeah, I've had that before myself, I'm sure. But like, you know, I think you know, if you were just to dismiss every kind of action B movie as being a bad movie, because on a very sort of technical aesthetic level, they're never going to be like, you know, under Tarkovsky, then it's just going to be, it's a very boring job for you. I think you have to kind of, you have to kind of like step out of yourself a little sometimes and look at the kind of relative merits of things.
No, sure. No, I really like Roadhouse, you know, the first one with Patrick Swayze. It's
amazing film.
Yeah, amazing film. But
more than you want to be, though, is the question.
Yeah, the trailer's out, and it looks pretty close to the original in a way, which is great. But I also, as I wrote with you in the terms, I also came from, you know, watching movies, but also reading always about movies, because I couldn't afford the ticket, or I wasn't allowed to go into the movie yet, but I still had the magazine. But the magazine was in a way then also something I could read before watching the movie, but also afterwards in retrospect, and, you know, trying to reflect on the experience of this movie going. And I guess, is that a reflection that plays a role for you, that you also try to write something that is valuable when you already have seen the movie as a reader?
That's a pretty deep question. It's a hard one to answer, I think, because I think that I do try and come to things with a sense of objectivity and simplicity in a way, and I guess, are you asking what I maybe I'm not answering your question, but what I will say is one of the one of the things that we have in the we have lots of kind of new writers in the magazine, and one of the things we do is kind of in the way that we're looking for new illustrators, we're looking for new writers as well, and with that comes you do have to do maybe a little bit more editing, and you have to be a bit more patient with people. And there is part of this job that is about cultivating new talent, and what we're trying to the thing that we're trying to cultivate is a voice, and actually get critics to kind of move away from what they think is a way of writing about film, like a kind of almost cliched film critic language, which the people who read about film have kind of taken on by osmosis, almost unconsciously
already.
And you tend to kind of certainly younger people, and it's good because it's good that you get a sense that they know what a film review should sound like. But I think that the what we're trying to do is kind of get people to realize that once it's good that the structure of a film review and the language and the terms that you would use and the ways that you would analyze a film, but we kind of want you to sort of once you know those rules, we want you to kind of try and forget them, and it's almost like the kind of, maybe this is a bit highfalutin to make the comparison, but it's a bit like jazz, basically. It's people know that you have people who are really good at pop songs and the pop song structure of verse, chorus, verse, break, but and that's how all their reviews look like that. But then you have people, someone a good example would be someone like Richard Brody of the New Yorker, who he's like a kind of, I would see him as a sort of jazz film critic, in that he has there is a flow and a coherence to his writing, but you could never necessarily impose it'd be hard to impose a structure on it, because the way he writes is a representation of his thought processes, and the way he kind of links ideas together is purely through how they're coming to him. And I think what we're trying to get to, the ideal is people, having kind of writers and critics who can write in that way that is representative of thought patterns, of let's try, rather than overthink it and move, restructuring and writing down idle thoughts and trying to sort of fit a review together like a puzzle. Let's just try and make it easier for you to actually create something that is representative of how you're actually thinking at that moment. But that's not an easy thing to do. So maybe I'm not sure if I've completely answered your question there. But
well, I don't think you can answer that question. So you came very close to whatever you can say about that, and thanks very much. David, last question. I also find it very interesting that you have a lot of transmedial extensions, like your YouTube channel, and we already talked about your podcast, but also books. You have published some books with Little White Lies, and you already said that you use your podcast more to talk about the opinions on films, not so much reviewing. And can you tell us a little bit about how you use the other media extensions? So what topics, what movies do you choose for your YouTube channel or for your website? So in which way do they extend the magazine?
Well, the thing I would say about all those things and why we have them is like, essentially, like when you had this period in the maybe early noughts where suddenly print media needed to pivot to digital, which is like making sure they had like a website and were engaging this sort of increasing digital audience, and in the end, it wasn't a great thing because it meant that there was like this sort of migration of like people from one media to another, and print had a really bad time of it, and advertisers all moved to digital because they kind of thought, oh, actually this is where the audience is. But the place we're in now is like, we have these various channels and these creative outlets, and despite the fact that it's the same people curating them and the same people creating content for them, we're never thinking about rather than like, oh, this is the Little White Lies audience who read the magazine and now they're listening to the podcast. We're like, actually, what about if we think that it's like maybe 5% crossover, that actually 95% of people listening to the podcast don't read the magazine or don't read the website, and 95% of people who watch the videos don't know about the magazine or don't read it, so we're like, the way that the landscape and the sort of technology exists and the way people consume now is that people don't have time to do all these things. So we're trying to kind of talk to people on these platforms,
right,
and try wherever possible, like not to be trying to move them away or try to get them to go somewhere else. So like the podcast audience is very much made for audio and a podcast audience, and the way we talk about films is different to the way we would talk about them in the magazine or online.
So they are not extensions. You're saying they are more standalones in a way.
Exactly. Yeah. I think, it's still an audience and it's still valuable, and it's still, it's having like, we have like 50,000 subscribers to our YouTube channel, and, we're getting like 20,000 listens to the podcast. And, that's still like, that's still audience that we can kind of tabulate, and it's valuable. And like, but to get a message across, we have to do it on all of these mediums. But it's all about kind of gaining that trust and making something that you think people want, but also being mindful of the medium itself, and trying not to push people away or getting people to sort of exist across all these like digital planes. Just try, if you've got someone in a place, try and like keeping them there is hard enough. Getting them to go somewhere else is like super hard. So let's just try and keep them for now. So it's the impulse behind all these extra things is like, it is about audience building, but like, I think that we're not thinking about like, when you have the Venn diagram of all these different things, the crossover between the bubbles is maybe a lot smaller than people might think.
Right. Well, thank you, David, so much for these valuable insights and for your honest talk, truth and film magazines.
Thank you for having me.
So much.